أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. صلى الله عليه وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة. يا ليتنا فيا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. قال تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا، قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. It is narrated that in the ziyarah of Al-Arba'in, which is a ziyarah that is composed by our sixth holy Imam, alayhi salam, he speaks about the goal that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam wanted to achieve through his sacrifice. And there's a line in Ziyaratul Arba'in where we recite, and these are words that are being uttered by an infallible Imam. And the line in Ziyaratul Arba'in says, describing Imam al-Hussein, وَبَذَلَ مُهْجَتَهُ فِيكَ, that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he sacrificed his muhja. The word muhja in the Arabic language refers to the blood that circulates in the heart. And this is the most precious thing a person has. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam in the ziyarah, he says, وَبَذَلَ مُهْجَتَهُ فِيكَ, that Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he sacrificed the blood of his heart. For what purpose? For your sake, and to achieve what? وَبَذَلَ مُهْجَتَهُ فِيكَ لِيَسْتَنْقِذَ عِبَادَكَ مِنَ الْجَهَالَةِ وَحَيْرَةَ الضَّلَالَةِ. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he sacrificed his life, he sacrificed and spilled the blood that circulated in his blessed heart to save the people, to save them from ignorance, and to rescue them from the bewilderment of misguidance. And therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, if we want to truly honor the sacred blood of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, we have to be a community that focuses on spiritual and religious education. Because if you do ma'tam of Imam al-Hussein, but you don't invest in your Islamic education, then this is defeating the purpose of the mission of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam wants us all to be people of ilm, to be people of ma'rifah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the verse that I began with from Surah At-Tahrim, ayah number 6, Allah says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, O you who believe, qu anfusakum, shield your souls, protect your souls from that which harms it, from that which damages it. But you have an additional responsibility. You are responsible for yourselves, yes, but you are also responsible for your families. And this is especially important for the guardians of the household. And this is the responsibility first and foremost of the husbands. You are the heads of the households. You have a duty before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ensure that your family educates themselves Islamically. And you have a duty to prevent and to block all of the negative influences. In the past, it was a lot easier to block the negative influences. But now, the negative influences are in our pockets. The cell phones, the iPads, the movies that are shown. During Friday prayer, I spoke a little bit about the craze that we've seen over the past month about the new Barbie movie. And I want to repeat some of the comments, and I want to expand a little bit on the discussion that I had during Salat al-Jumu'ah. Now, for those of you who may not know, and this is important for us Muslims, that we should not be people who just blindly follow the masses. Everyone is excited about the Barbie movie, yeah, then we should also go and watch it. Why do we have to be like that? We shouldn't be blind sheep, because there were many blind sheep during the time of Imam al-Hussein, and that's why they weren't with Imam al-Hussein. They were misguided by the propaganda machine. We have to be careful not to also be deluded by Hollywood propaganda. It's just a different form of propaganda. Now, as Muslims, and this is what I mentioned today during the khutbah, that we have to pay attention to what we consume. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Abasa, He says, addressing humanity, addressing the human being, فَلْيَنظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِهِ. Let the human being, let man consider his food. Pay attention to what you put in your bodies. What you eat has an impact on your spirituality. You know, this is why when you look at the story of Musa in the Quran, when he was in the palace of Fir'aun, Allah would not allow him to suckle from any woman. He couldn't take milk from the polytheistic women. He only took his milk from a pure source, the milk of his mother. It has an effect. So Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, when he's asked about the ta'wil of this ayah, the Imam explains that there is something deeper here that we need to consider. And the meaning, one of the esoteric meanings of the ayah is عِلْمُهُ الَّذِي يَأْخُذُ عَمَّنْ يَأْخُذُ. You have to also take into consideration what you consume in terms of information and knowledge. Many of us may not know the history of the invention of the Barbie doll. We take these things for granted. Sometimes we think that these companies and these directors are just harmless, innocent people who just want to put out beneficial content. We know that that's not true. Many of us may not know that in the 1950s, there was a comic strip that was catered to a male audience, and it was an adult comic strip that featured a character called Lily. And Lily was a character in this comic strip. This was in the 1950s in West Germany. Lily was a provocative character in a comic strip, and the role that she played in these stories was that she tried to seduce wealthy men. She basically sold her body to attract the attention and to gain proximity to wealthy men. Now, what happened in the 1950s, they made a doll after this character. The doll was the Build Lily doll. Now, initially, the doll was very provocative. It was basically a doll that represented that character, and it was essentially an escort, a female escort. That's ultimately what it was. In 1959, a Jewish woman, a Jewish businesswoman by the name of Ruth Handler. She basically took this provocative doll and she sanitized it. She tried to make it a little bit more child-friendly. Now, this doll basically represents the product of the colonized mindset. It's invented by a Jewish woman. It wasn't invented by a blonde-haired, blue-eyed European woman. It was invented by a Jewish woman who unfortunately seems to have a colonized mind, because this doll became the representation of what an ideal woman should look like, what the standard of beauty is. And therefore, the Barbie doll represents the quintessential woman, the woman that all women should aspire to be. And that is what? A white, tall, skinny, physically attractive woman. These are the qualities that women should try to emulate. Now, this is a little bit about the background of the doll itself. And I know that the Barbie company, they've introduced, hijabi dolls, and sometimes in the Muslim community, we celebrate these announcements as a sort of progress. We consider it to be progress. We consider it to be a milestone in our story as Muslims who live in the West. And we celebrate this as positive Muslim representation. But this is not the type of representation that Muslims should celebrate, because everything about the Barbie doll contradicts what Islam wants women to aspire to. Islam doesn't want women to flaunt their beauty. Islam does not say that these particular physical traits are the standard for beauty. Now, when you look at the movie itself, of course, the movie was inspired by the doll. As Muslims, before we watch and consume films and shows and movies, we have to look a little bit deeper. We have to ask, what is the motivation? Who's the director? The director, and by the way, this movie, it's been less than a month. It's grossed over $1 billion at the box offices. The highest grossing movie in history. It used to be the Titanic or the Avatar. Now, those are all distant seconds and thirds. The movie was directed by Greta Gerwig. She's a feminist. Now, the plot of the movie, and as I said during the Jum'ah khutbah, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't want anyone to say that we're going to see it because Sheikh Azhar saw the movie. No, I'm not encouraging anyone to watch the movie. But if you read the plot, what you find is that the underlying message of the story is the following. Of course, in the movie, this plastic doll comes to life, right? She goes from plastic to flesh and blood. She steps into the real world, and she makes a very heartbreaking discovery. And that is that the world is dominated by men. We live in a patriarchal world. Now, I don't deny that there is toxic patriarchy in the world. But the message here is what? She lives in a world that is dominated by men, and essentially, what does she have to do? She needs to be successful. And to live and to succeed in a patriarchal world, number one, you don't need a man in your life, right? You don't need a man to be successful. Women can do it all. They can do it all, especially without men. Women don't need men. A woman should be successful, and success here means financially and material success. Again, Islam doesn't say that there's anything wrong with pursuing wealth, but to make that your ultimate pursuit is problematic. So the underlying message of this movie is what? Women can do it all, and they don't need men. And women should be financially successful, and they should flaunt their beauty. They should be sexualized beings, and ultimately, they should not bog themselves down through marriage. They shouldn't settle down. They should expand their wings. They should progress. Why sign up for what can be considered to be a domestic prison? Now, my dear brothers and sisters, when we consume this content, is it a surprise that many young Muslims, they grow up, yes, they might pray, they might fast, but they carry many values and ideas that are antithetical to Islam? When they're constantly being exposed and indoctrinated by different strands of feminism, it's not a surprise for a young Muslim lady to grow up and to basically think to herself that, wow, my religion is completely patriarchal. In fact, God himself is patriarchal because he sent 124,000 male prophets. All their lives they're being taught what? Men are trash. Man, well, the prophet is a man, newsflash. Ahlul Bayt, there are many men of Ahlul Bayt. The prophets are men. Your father is a man. Now what happens when this content is constantly being consumed is that a lot of these ladies, what happens? They develop contempt for all men. And sometimes it includes their fathers, their brothers. The men that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the responsibility to protect, they look at them with suspicion. They consider they have a problem with all forms of male authority. Sometimes sisters, they come to me and they identify as feminists. And of course, the word feminist has lost all meaning. It's a loaded term and there are so many different strands of feminism. But by and large, this is an ideology that has a problem with any type of male authority. It considers it inherently oppressive, that women need to liberate themselves from all types of male authority. Now, yes, there are oppressive males. No one is denying that. But there's also healthy male authority. The Quran, for example, says, الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. Men are the caretakers, the providers of women. Allah subhanahu, this is the vision of the Quran, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has removed the financial burden from women. This is what's supposed to happen ideally. That it's not that you are being deprived of work. Allah has relieved you of this responsibility so you can focus on the things that give you more fulfillment. الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. Feminism says what? Most strands of feminism will say, no, men are not the caretakers of women. Women don't need men. Islam teaches us what? We need each other. Men need women and women need men. Feminism sells the lie that women can do it all, but they can't. It's too much to be a wife, a mother, and a breadwinner. How can a person juggle all of these roles? It's too much. And this is why Islam says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has relieved women of this burden. It's not that Islam has deprived women from, public, positions of leadership. Allah has relieved you of this. And this was the reaction of Fatima to Zahra when the Prophet said to her that you are responsible for what is within the household and Ali is responsible for what is outside of the household. Fatima to Zahra never said to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, why are you discriminating? Why are we being deprived? She said that my heart was filled with joy because I was relieved of the duties that had been placed on the men. الرجال قوامون على النساء. Feminism says no, we don't accept that. وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةً. That for there to be a functioning household, there has to be a head of a household. If a country needs a president and an organization needs a CEO, there needs to be someone in the household who's the head of the household. This doesn't mean that the husband is a tyrant or the husband should just do whatever he likes. Of course you consult, you're a benevolent leader, but a household needs a leader. This is what the Quran teaches. This is what Ahlul Bayt teach. Feminism says what? No, there's no leader. Every functioning entity has a leader, but the family doesn't have a leader? Of course the family has a leader. لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ. The share of inheritance for a son is double that of the daughter. Do you think feminism accepts this? Of course it doesn't accept this. Because feminism what? Most strands of feminism preach what? Gender equality. In Islam, we don't believe in gender equality for the simple reality that men and women are different. وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى. We reject that assumption. Why should they be treated equally when our DNA is different? Our DNA is different. Why should two human beings who have fundamental difference, why should they be treated equally? Islam takes into consideration the real differences between men and women. And that's why these types of movies that contain sexual innuendos, movies that glamorize singlehood, live the single life. Why should you get married? Why should you chain yourself to a man? This is against the teachings of Islam, my dear brothers and sisters. There was a woman who came to Imam al-Baqir, salawatullahi alayhi, Allahumma salli ala. And she says to Imam al-Baqir, أصلحك الله إني امرأة متبتلة. She says to Imam al-Baqir or Imam al-Sadiq, she says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I am a woman who has vowed to be single. She doesn't want to get married. So the Imam says, why don't you want to get married? She says, Altamisu fadla, because I want to attain virtue. She just wanted to focus on ibadah. She just wanted to focus on worship. I don't want to get distracted by, having responsibilities towards a husband and children. I want to just focus on worship. So this woman wants to be single so she can pray and do dua. What does the Imam say? He says, if there was any merit in that, Fatimatu Zahra would have been the foremost. Fatimatu Zahra is your role model. She is the ideal woman. Fatimatu Zahra got married. She had a husband. She had children. She raised the best family. What Fatimatu Zahra did had more value than 1,000 men. We shouldn't diminish motherhood and the importance of being a wife. Sometimes when we have someone in the community, this is a doctor. I'm not saying don't pursue your education. Don't misread what I'm saying. Sometimes we celebrate pharmacists, women who are pharmacists and doctors and CEOs, and we act as though the stay-at-home mother is the failure. Or the stay-at-home wife is not really offering anything. She hasn't really done anything with her life. No, she's done the best thing you can do with your life. And that is to focus on the family, to build a family, to raise a family of God-conscious people. And this is what we learned from Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam. Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam, what makes her great was not the fact that Sayyida Zainab was not a woman who celebrated being single. She was not a woman who prided herself on the fact that she brushed shoulders with other men. No, Sayyida Zainab was a woman of modesty. She was the woman of piety. And the only reason why she spoke to someone like Yazid is not because she did it voluntarily. She says in her famous khutbah to Yazid, la'natullahi alayhi, she speaks to him with such courage and such poise. He says, أَمِنَ الْعَدْلِ يَبْنَ الطُّلَقَاءِ. All of the men, many of the men, they would be afraid to speak to him in such a way. They would call him commander of the faithful. Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam, what does she say? She says, يَبْنَ الطُّلَقَاءِ. O son of the freed slaves. She's reminding Yazid of who he is. Your father and your grandfather, Muawiyah and Abu Sufyan, when Rasulullah conquered Mecca, the Prophet could have taken them as his slaves. But he freed them. He showed mercy to them. You are the son of the freed slaves. Ya ibn al-tulaqa, amin al-adli ya ibn al-tulaqa. Is it fair? Is it just O son of the freed slaves, أمن العدل يا ابن الطلقاء تخديرك إماءك ونساءك وسوقك بنات رسول الله سبايا? Is it fair, O son of the freed slaves, that you cover your women? Your women are veiled, but the daughters of the Prophet are exposed in a majlis that is full of non-mahram men? Is this fair? Is this just? And then she says, وَلَئِن جَرَّتْ عَلَيَّ الدَّوَاهِي مُخَاطَبَتَكَ. She says, O Yazid, circumstances have forced me to speak to someone like you. Zainab is too noble to converse with a fasiq like Yazid. Zainab does not give the light of day to anyone. Circumstances have forced me to speak to you. And then she says, إِنِّي لَأَسْتَصْغِرُ قَدْرَكَ. I consider your status to be low, and I consider your guilt to be great. You are, and admonishing you is too much for me. You're not worth my time. This is what she says to the likes of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. These are our role models, my dear brothers and sisters. As parents, we have a responsibility to instill in our daughters, to teach them about the beauty of what it means to be a wife, what it means to be a mother, what it means to be a Muslim woman who has so much self-respect that she would never compromise her Islamic values for some superficial empowerment. This is what we learn from Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam. This is what we learn from the women of Ahlul Bayt. And we need a revival, my dear brothers and sisters. There are so many isms that have pulled our children away from the path of Ahlul Bayt that we need to come back to the best ism, which is Shi'ism, following the path of Ahlul Bayt. On a night like this, and I only have a couple of minutes left, on a night like this, we remember the grief and the sorrow of Zainab alayhi salam. We can only imagine, my dear brothers and sisters, what she felt after Karbala. Because even though her brother was martyred in Karbala, she had that heartbreaking, gruesome visual reminder of what happened. You know, usually when a death happens, there's a burial that gives you a sense of closure. But Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, she was not given that closure. She had to travel for hundreds of miles through the deserts, and she had to look at the severed head of her brother. And there's a beautiful poem that captures how Zainab felt as she looked at the severed head of her brother as she journeyed from Karbala to Kufa, from Kufa to Sham. وَلِزَيْنَبٍ نَوْحٌ لِفَقْدِ شَقِيقِهَا وَلِزَيْنَبٍ نَوْحٌ لِفَقْدِ شَقِيقِهَا تَدْعُوهُ يَا ابْنَ الزَّاكِيَاتِ الرُّكَّعِ اليوم أصبغ في عزاك ملابسي سودا وأسكبها طلات الأدمع اليوم شبوا نارهم في منزلي وتنهبوا ما فيه حتى برقعي. She says, Ya Aba Abdullah, they took everything from me, including my outer veil. اليوم قادوني بذل يا أخي. Ya Aba Abdullah, they are escorting me in humiliation today. After she was escorted by Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas with honor and dignity, now who is escorting Zainab? The likes of Shimr ibn Dhil Jawshan. اليوم قادوني بذل يا أخي والصوت ألمني وأطفالي معي. As they were journeying through Karbala, as they went from Karbala to Kufa, from Kufa to Sham, The poet says that they did not leave the women and the children. Whenever they would cry and mourn, they would strike them with their batons. أنعم جوابا يا حسين أما ترى. The poet says Zainab would look at the head of Hussein and say, "Oh Hussein, oh my brother, don't you see what they are doing to us?" أنعم جوابا يا حسين أما ترى. Don't you see, Ya Aba Abdullah? Are you not looking at what Shimr is doing to us? شمر الخنا بالصوت ألم أضلعي. Shimr has struck me so many times that he has injured my ribs. فأجابها من فوق شاهقة القنا. قضي القضاء بما جرى فاسترجعي وتكفلي حال اليتامى وانظري ما كنت أصنع في حماهم فاصنعي. The poet says, if Aba Abdullah could speak to Zainab, he would have said to Zainab that be patient with the decree of Allah. Oh Zainab, say inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Leave your affair with Allah, but oh Zainab, I want you to look after the orphans just as I looked after them when I was alive. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
بیا و ببین دختر تو چه شبها که خوابش نبرده. بیا و ببین دختر تو چه شبها که خوابش نبرده. چه شبها که جای ستاره فقط زخم خود را شمرده. نوازش نشد جز به سیلی که رنگی نمانده به رویش. کسی هم نزد بعد تو آه به جز شعله شانه به مویش. امان از یتیمی، امان از اسیری، قیامت شد و من رسیدم به پیری. یا حسین یا ابن الزهرا، یا ابن الزهرا، یا ابن الزهرا، یا حسین. بماند چه ها که بمیدم، بماند چه ها که شنیدم، چه گویم از این روی نیلی، چه گویم ز موی سپیدم. بگو مادرت را که من هم کمی از غمش را کشیدم، که من ضرب دست عدو را چشیدم کشیدم. ببر با خود امشب مرا هم از اینجا، ببر با خوداری به دیدار زهرا. یا حسین یا ابن الزهرا، یا ابن الزهرا، یا ابن الزهرا، یا حسین الزهرا، یا ابن الزهرا، یا ابن الزهرا، یا حسین یا ابن الزهرا، یا ابن الزهرا، یا ابن الزهرا، یا حسین یا ابن الزهرا، یا ابن الزهرا، یا ابن الزهرا. ابی عبدالله، ابی عبدالله، ابی عبدالله صار الله، ابی عبدالله، ابی عبدالله، ابی عبدالله صار الله. یا علی مولا، یا علی مولا، یا علی مولا، یا مولا، یا علی، یا علی مولا، یا مولا. بی بی جان زهرا، بی بی جان زهرا، بی بی جان زهرا، یا زهرا. بی بی جان زهرا، بی بی جان زهرا، بی بی جان زهرا، یا زهرا. عمه جان زینب، عمه جان زینب، عمه جان زینب، یا زینب. عمه جان زینب، عمه جان زینب، عمه جان زینب، یا زینب. عمو جان عباس، عمو جان عباس، عمو جان عباس، یا عباس. عمو جان عباس، عمو جان عباس، یا عباس. رضا غریب الغربا، رضا غریب الغربا، رضا معین الضعفا، رضا غریب الغربا، رضا معین الضعفا. آقا به جان مادرت، آقا به جان مادرت، آن مادر غم پرورت، مرا نیاز دارد، مرا نیاز دارد. یا ابن الحسن، 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 یا ابن الحسن. صلی الله علی محمد و آل محمد.